everyone, and welcome to our presentation about the effectiveness of goal setting to increase physical activity in adults. We will discuss a study that we replicated that states that with having daily reminders to take steps each day, we can reach a goal of 10,000 steps a day. And by reaching that goal, we can further to increase our health. We would love if everyone can write down any questions you may have throughout the presentation, and we will answer those at the end. Everyone, a brief overview of what this PowerPoint is going to include. It's going to give you information on our literature review, our behavior, which is steps, and give that operational definition and include examples and non-examples. We're going to go into describing the setting, introducing our participants, going into detail on methods such as the materials, data collection, IOAs, and treatment fidelity. And then we're going to move on to the limitations that we identified throughout our study, the design, results, and go into our graphs to give you a kind of a visual. And last, our conclusion, which will wrap it all up. And references if you would like to learn more about our topic we studied.
Hi, I'm Angela, and we're going to go through some of the history of goal setting as far as ABA. In the late 1960s, Bear, Wolf, and Risley recognized the importance of goal setting in behavior change programs, setting the foundation for its integration into ABA interventions. Bear, Wolf, and Risley gave us a lot of the groundwork for what we're going to continue to talk about today. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say. In the 80s and 90s, we had Doran, who introduced the SMART goals framework, which emphasized specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. These piggyback right off of our fundamentals of ABA. 90s, you had Locke and Latham, and they had there's a lot of work, very prolific, that emphasized setting specific, challenging, attainable, and time-bound goals. And then we've got Miltenberger in 2019 shed light on self-management strategies and goal setting, emphasizing the importance of self-monitoring and self-control for successful health behavior change. There's a lot more research recently, Kearney's research about meaningful goals, individualized approaches in health behavior change. And just throughout history, researchers and practitioners have refined goal setting approaches. Using evidence-based strategies, everything that we do is always changing. Everything we do in ABA is always changing because we are constantly getting new data and we are constantly inventing new stimuli. I didn't have a smartwatch, So look to the future for a lot of really interesting articles. And if you take a look at our literature review, there is a lot more recent work that you can check out.
So we're going to be discussing the behavior that we were tracking, and that is steps. The operational definition that we created was the participant is in a standing position and picks up their foot, the foot heel, then toe in forward direction. The participant will alternate between their feet, and the participant may transport oneself to a novel location, or they may remain stationary if on an exercise machine. Some examples of this would be running a mile or more, walking or running on a hike, walking at any intensity on a treadmill, and some non-examples of this would be going swimming, participants sitting but their legs are moving, and biking or doing stationary bike pedaling.
During this study, there were 5 participants, ages 23 to 40, that participated in this study. All participants are female graduate students completing an online master's program through Ball State University. All participants are also currently employed in the role of registered behavior technicians in various settings. 4 of the participants work in clinic-based direct care, and 1 participant is employed at school, community, and in-home client care. All trials were conducted in the participants' natural environment. So outside of everyone's work life, their personal life consists of leisure activities involving variable levels of physical activity, and a breakdown of the participants and their average daily activity levels will be listed in the participant section following this slide.
My name is Alexandria Palmer. I go by Lexi. I am a participant in the study that was replicated. I'm a 26-year-old female who resides in Mendon, Michigan. Once a week, I participate in running anywhere between 3 to 6 miles. I also try and go hiking at least once a month. I'm a full-time registered behavior technician. I also have the title of a lead registered behavior technician trainer, along with an apprenticeship position in a clinical setting.
Hi, I'm Angela. I am a participant in this study as well as a researcher for the replication project. I am 40. I have 2 kids and a husband and 4 dogs and a house in Indiana. I am moderately physically active, weather permitting, and do a lot of camping and kayaking. I don't have any limitations or see any conflicts of interest. Hi, I'm Angela.
Hello, my name is Maria McKinney. I'm one of the participants in the study that my group replicated. I'm also one of the researchers who analyzed the results from the study. I am 23 years old. I reside in Dillsburg, and I engage in leisure physical activities such as yoga, walking in the woods, maybe taking my parents' dog for a walk, and occasional tennis that's mainly just for fun. I am a full-time registered behavioral technician, and I also have a part-time job at an outdoor wedding venue. There are no physical health concerns that would impact my participation in the study.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I'm a 23-year-old living in Michigan. I'm also a full-time RBT working in a clinical setting. I work with one client, adolescent age, and my free time is spent being outside, cooking, spending time with family and friends, and I have no health concerns at this moment.
And I was the last participant. So my name is Katie. I am a 25-year-old female residing in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I go on daily walks with my dog, and I join pickup volleyball games that are once every week. And then I occasionally participate in anaerobic exercises. So sometimes I weightlift. And I am a full-time registered behavior technician, and I also hold a lead therapist and apprenticeship position in the clinical setting. For our methods section, I'll start with materials. All participants either owned or had access to a smartwatch with step tracking capability. Samsung and Apple devices were used exclusively in this experiment and were considered comparably reliable and accurate. All participants also had access to a cell phone that linked to their watch and a computer with high-speed internet. We also had a group Excel spreadsheet for daily step tracking that was made available to all participants. And participants used physical reminders in the form of sticky notes and also digital reminders in the form of timers and alarms that served as reminders to meet their step goals. And paper data was taken if there was an electronic communication error, which we had none. And for data collection, baseline data for all participants were recorded in the first week of the trial. Data was submitted by all participants daily by 11:59 Eastern Standard Time, both on the group spreadsheet and in the group chat in the form of an image. So in the event a participant was not engaged in restful activities between 11:30 and 11:59 p.m., that was selected, individuals followed the goal of obtaining 10,000 steps per day, and an alarm was set at a beneficial time by participants for their individual reminder to take more steps. Participants were not rewarded monetarily for uploading 93% of their daily data every 2 weeks. Instead, they were motivated by grades to upload data weekly by the end of each Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Also, for our method section, I'll go in with the IOA. Participants utilized the standard activity tracker application associated with their brand of smartwatch. And then participants were expected to screenshot their prior day step total and send to the group chat. Immediately following the image submission, the total step count was entered into the group Excel spreadsheet. The IOA we used was exact count per interval. So when the total step count and the screenshot matched the value entered into the group spreadsheet, they were considered in agreement. The group spreadsheet also tracked input and recorded changes in real time. In the event a participant was unable to utilize their screenshot feature for any reason, a video of the individual was required to be submitted. This video needed to consist of all the participants showing their faces and the watch screen displaying the step total. The video also needed to include a verbal confirmation of the date and time and the step count. Fortunately, none of us needed to utilize the video. And then for treatment fidelity, the participants engaged in running to obtain their increased step goals. However, participants were able to obtain their increased 10% of steps from the previous week through other methods besides running when preferred. Each week, participants looked at the steps taken for the previous week to observe if there was a 10% increase in the steps taken. Participants then replied to the group chat at the end of the week observation period by saying, I have increased 10% of steps taken, or I have not increased 10% of steps taken. Treatment integrity was assessed based on the goal setting and feedback from digital reminders. Reminders were not a contest between participants' ability to increase physical activity, but an ability to keep each participant consistent during the study.
Okay, so for the limitations, I'm Rachel. So I was not able to collect data for one day during intervention due to switching to a new phone. So this meant that like my watch wasn't working when I was switching the new phone. So one day I have no data for. Katie was on a boat for 2 days, so that meant she was not able to walk a lot because she was sitting, so she wasn't able to collect a lot of steps. Lexi's watch for one of the days was not fully charged and so she didn't collect data for part of the day. And then Angela, her watch band broke, which resulted in an inaccurate step count. And then Angela took baseline from a different week due to a vacation that would have skewed the data. So that was helpful to get the data more accurate. Marina was unable to collect more steps for a few days due to the poor air quality outside. She also mentioned that she doesn't have a gym membership, so she was unable to increase those steps because she couldn't go outside. And then she was also sick one of the days for collecting data. Yep.
For our study, we used a multiple baseline design. So baseline data was first obtained, and then interventions of goal setting and digital alarms were implemented. So for multiple baselines, we had a staggered effect. So for Lexi, baseline data was recorded for 5 days. Angela recorded her baseline data for 6 days, Marina for 7 days, Katie for 9, and Rachel for 10 days. So after each participant collected baseline data, each individual began implementing the interventions of goal setting and digital alarms. And then data collection occurred for 35 days.
Hello, this is our results of Zara Tate's 2019 study that we replicated, and we used a multiple baseline design across participants, the same one that Zara Tate's used, except we have 5 participants, which means we had 5 graphs to graph, as compared to Zara Tate's original study where there were only 4 graphs and 4 participants. Overall, the way we graphed our data is very similar to Zara Tate's. We have the similarities of using a dashed horizontal line depicting the step criteria for each participant, which is one of the interventions that Zara Tate used in their original study. We also used the same interventions as Zara Tate's, and the first intervention we did was a goal setting criteria. So for our goal for each participant was to at least get 10,000 steps per day. And then after a week would go by, we would average those steps up, and we would then send a text indicating that their new criteria was 10% increase from their average amount of steps. So, for example, let's say my average step range was 1,000 or 100 steps, and then the second week I would need to increase my steps to 110 or more per day, so I would have a higher average of increased 10% of my average steps from the week before. So that textual feedback was given to the participants after the week was over, and in the original study, Zara Tate had researchers message the participants saying, you have reached criteria of increasing your steps by 10%, or they did not in a very neutral setting. However, since we were the researchers and participants in the study, each researcher would independently send a text to a group chat saying, I reached the 10% criteria, or I did not reach the 10% criteria. Overall, our results displayed that the 2 interventions of goal setting and textual feedback were not effective for our 5 participants in our replication of the study. On this slide, you see our first participant and her graph zoomed in from our original multiple baseline graph that you saw on the previous page or previous slide. And you can see a little more of the data points and the number of steps she took during our baseline and intervention phase. You can see on the intervention phase, she was able to meet the goal setting criteria of 10,000 steps daily on 2 occurrences during the intervention. Sessions day 19, Lexi took 11,015 steps, and session day 20, Lexi was able to obtain 21,758 steps. This suggests that the goal intervention may have a slight effect in evoking increased physical activity through step taking, but maybe at a delayed response or a latency with the intervention of having that little sticky note or reminder saying you can do it, you got this, or you can beat 10,000 steps. However, in the beginning portion and middle portion of the graph, it shows that it was ineffective. Additionally, Lexi was unable to reach the 10,000 criteria increase during most of the phases of the study. You can see that her baseline average for the steps was 5,359 steps, and the criteria for the first week of intervention was to achieve at least 5,894 steps a day or more to achieve an average of higher steps for the intervention of the criteria of a 10% increase, which would be our textual feedback. Lexi's averages of steps taking for week 1 were 4,742 steps. For week 2, it was 5,622 steps. And for week 3, it was 11,597 steps. So during week 3, she was able to increase her baseline average by over by 10% to 11,597 steps. It shows that the intervention of textual feedback may have been effective. It just had, again, a delay or latency of effectiveness to evoke the increased physical activity through step taking. Overall, the graph shows that there is stability in the beginning of her intervention, showing like the data points are relatively consistent, except for towards the end, there is a huge bounce of step increase, suggesting that the textual feedback may have been able to evoke an increase of physical activity. This is our second participant, Angela, and she started the intervention on day 7. Please note that Lexi and Angela and the rest of our participants will implement the intervention at different days and sessions due to the goal of trying to find the functional relationship, the effectiveness of the intervention, and if all of our participants are able to increase their physical activity through step taking by the end of the intervention, and you see an increase, you can see that the intervention is effective across participants. So here, looking at Angela's graph, you can also note that there is a lack of x-axis labels and y-axis labels. The x-axis label will not be shown for the rest of the participants until we get to the very last participant of our graph, because it is not the correct format to follow. Additionally, Angela does not have a y-axis label because we want to center that y-axis label on the graph, and it would not have been centered on her name. So let's look at more of the actual raw data from her graph. The goal setting intervention was shown to be effective for 1 day during Angela's intervention phase. On day 9, she was able to obtain 10,774 steps. This suggests that the goal intervention had a slight impact on evoking increased physical activity through step taking, but generally does not show to be effective for the following weeks. If you look at this graph and also look back at Lexi's graph, you can see that her Angela's increased 10,000 steps or more was early into the intervention as compared to Lexi's, which is later in the intervention. So that is very interesting to see that disparity between the two, suggesting that maybe this 10,000 step goal is not effective for each individual because of the differences. Additionally, Angela was able to increase her physical activity by 10% criteria the first week of intervention, but was unable to achieve that 10% increase criteria the following week. So if you look here at Angela's baseline, her average score of steps was 5,287 steps. And then you see this line here, the first horizontal line. We set that line there as a marker of she needs to increase her original average baseline of 5,287 steps by 10%. And that's where that line is. And you can see once you average up her week of steps taken for week 1, she was able to get an average of 8,088 steps during the first week. So yes, for the textual feedback for week 1, Angela was able to increase her steps and also achieve the goal setting of 10,000 steps 1 time during that first week. Overall, you can see that in the later part of the intervention for weeks 2 and 3, she was not able to increase her steps by 10%, or was she able to obtain at least 10,000 steps or more on a daily for that goal setting criteria. So there may have been other confound variables or a lack of participants' interest of the intervention as compared to the first week. Maybe due to the novelty of the intervention during the first week, the participant was really motivated with the addition of the textual feedback and the goal setting a reminder to get 10,000 steps or more. Overall, her graph does display lots of bounces within the graph, so it's not that stable of data, but you can see in the beginning there was a slight increase. suggesting maybe a functional relationship, but then it does decrease. So overall, no functional relationship, showing the effectiveness of these two interventions. On this graph is our third participant who started their intervention on day 8. As you can see on this multiple baseline graph, you can see that there is a y-axis label and no x-axis label. The y-axis label is perfectly formatted in the center of our graph since we have 5 participants, and there is no x-axis label due to Marina, our third participant, not being the last participant of the graph. However, you do see that she does have the same thing as the previous participants, a label for each phase, baseline phase and the intervention phase of goal setting and technical feedback. The raw data here state that the goal setting intervention was not effective at all during the intervention phase and was only achieved one time during the baseline phase. So this does suggest that the participant is able to obtain 10,000 steps or more, but the step criteria may be too high for the participant during the intervention phase, or there is no motivation behind a sticky note saying you can do this or you can get 10,000 steps. Additionally, you see that the participant was unable to increase their step criteria during the textual feedback intervention during the first and second week. Marina's baseline average of steps was 6,236 steps. And then increasing that by 10%, the new criteria set during the first horizontal straight line is 6,859 steps. However, you can see that Marina's average of steps for week 1 was not higher than 6,859 steps. It was actually 5,965 steps. Also for week 2, she obtained 5,923 steps, which actually is a decrease in the average of steps she was taking during week 2. So this shows that the 10% increase new criteria that was set for Marina after week 2 average of steps were obtained. She was not able to do that, and she actually regressed. In week 3, you do see an increase of steps, which came out to an average of 9,032 steps. However, this participant was only taking data for 3 days during week 3, so this could be due to compound variables, or as seen in Lexi, our first participant's graph, a latency of evoking step-taking behavior. Due to this graph being very bouncy and inconsistent, it may have been more beneficial to either change the intervention or continue taking intervention data to see if any stability or consistency occurs as the time goes by. On this slide, you have Katie, our fourth participant, and as you can see on her graph, she is also missing the y-axis label and x-axis label due to this multiple baseline not needing those labels for this participant because of the formatting being inaccurate. However, she does have the same requirements of having a label for her phases and her name in the right lower hand corner. The raw data shows that the goal setting intervention was not effective during the intervention phase 2. She was not able to obtain 10,000 step goal, but very close. You can see during week 2, she was really close to getting that 10,000 steps. However, this may suggest, as seen from past participants, the step criteria or step goal of 10,000 steps is just not effective for these participants. You can also see that she was able to increase her step criteria by 10% during week 2. So the average steps taken for week 1 were she was able to increase in week 2. Her average steps for week 1 was 6,461 steps, and then she was able to increase her steps to an average of 7,393 steps in the second week. However, you can see that the first week of intervention, it was not effective for her to increase those 10,000 steps with both the goal setting sticky note set out and the textual feedback that she was given. Her first week average of steps taken were 6,304 steps. So that suggests that it was very hard for the participant to either get into the motivation to take steps, or there are other confound variables. You can see here that the textual feedback may have had a latency effect, as shown in participant Lexi and participant Marina, as compared to participant Angela, who was able to immediately have the goal setting criteria and technical feedback to be effective. Overall, you can see that her data is bouncy, but it's on the higher scale of the goal setting 10,000 steps. So maybe if this study were to go a little longer, you may see an increase in step taking from Katie. This is our last participant, Rachel, and as you can see on her graph, she has only the y-axis label, and that says sessions because she is our last participant in our multiple baseline design, and she also lacks having the y-axis label because, again, this is a zoomed-in version of the multiple baseline graph that was depicted on the first slide of the results. The raw data displays that the goal intervention was not shown to be effective for this individual as well, suggesting that the 10,000 step goal setting was not an effective one for this participant as well. Additionally, this participant was able to increase her step criteria by 10% during the first week of intervention. As you can see here, Rachel's baseline average was 4,552 steps, and that was increased by 10% or more to an average of 7,031 steps during her first week of intervention. And her expected criteria for week 1 was to obtain at least 5,000 steps or more. Overall, Rachel's graph shows a lot of bouncing, suggesting a lot of inconsistency, but she was able to almost get 10,000 steps towards the last week, or in the last week of intervention. And that, again, as seen in the other graphs, that the intervention is not effective, suggesting that the goal setting of 10,000 steps may be too high for this individual, and that the textual feedback from the participants or the researchers through the text message was not an effective MO for the participants to increase their steps from the week before. This is our conclusion slide of our results, and I just wanted to summarize everything that was discussed in the results. 2 out of our 5 participants were able to reach their step goal of 10,000 steps per day. The step goal was only reached 3 times during the intervention phase, suggesting that while they were able to obtain the step goal, only 2 people were, and it only occurred a few times during the entire intervention phase for all 5 participants, suggesting that maybe the step goal is too high. All of our participants were able to increase their step criteria at least 1 time during the intervention phase. However, it was not consistently done to increase their step taking by 10% during the intervention. Our suggestions to improve for future replications of the study may be to set a step goal that compared to the participants' average of steps taken. So, for example, if I were to take 100 steps, and that was my average for my entire baseline, it would be increased by 10%, and that would be it, instead of the expectation of the goal setting of 10,000 steps. However, again, the intention of this intervention is to obtain 10,000 steps to increase one's physical activity. So Zarate's study was intended to increase that physical activity. So reducing that individual increase of steps may vary across participants because one participant may be limited access to physical activity, and one participant may have more access to obtain physical activity. The textual feedback, I believe one of the hardest parts of the textual feedback was in our study, participants also played the role as the researcher. So that meant that the participants' responsibility was to text the other participants that were also playing as compared to Zara Tate's original study, where researchers were only researchers and participants were only participants. So the participants didn't have so much involvement with knowing the 10% criteria. Additionally, Zara Tate's had a $7 money cash in that participants would be given if they obtain 10,000 steps. Or not 10,000, sorry, a 10% increase of their steps each week. And if they did that, they would get $7. If it continued the second week, then that would be increased to $14. So every time it would be increased by $7. So that is a huge motivation. As to our participants, our motivation was we are in a graduate class and we should really work hard for our grades. So maybe the motivation of money versus grades was not equivalent to the participants in Zara Tate's 2019 study as compared to our replication of the study. Overall, the results show that the intervention of goal setting and textual feedback were not effective for our 5 participants' replication set.